So welcome to the AMATYC 2014 webinar series. This is Tips and Tricks for a Successful Pathways Implementation with Kathy Elmy and Dan Petrak, and this presentation is sponsored by the Developmental Mathematics Committee of AMATYC. And AMATYC is the American Mathematical Association of two-year colleges, and our core value is building expertise and exhibiting leadership in the teaching and learning of mathematics, enhancing personal growth, and improving teaching methods and effectiveness as a personally initiated lifelong responsibility. And for more information, you can find us online at amatic.org. And please note that the views expressed by the presenters today are not necessarily the views of AMATYC, and any commercial products mentioned by the presenters are not endorsed by AMATYC. And now we're going to switch to our presenter slides. I'm actually going to hide these real quickly. And so if you could all welcome Kathy and Dan in the chat room, that would be great. And I'll turn the mic over to them right now.
Hi everyone, this is Kathy Elmy. Can you hear me? Hopefully we can. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So John has introduced us, but I'll go ahead and let you know who we are. Let me navigate this. Okay, so I'm at Rock Valley College in Rockford, Illinois, so about an hour and a half from Chicago. And Dan is at Des Moines Area Community College in Des Moines, Iowa. Our email addresses are listed there. They'll also be listed at the end, and the slides and recording will be available at a later date. So you'll be able to have all of this if you want access to it. So I'll let Dan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well? I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. You're doing great. Yeah, I don't do. I guess we can talk about. You want to talk about what we teach and all that stuff too, right?
Sure.
Right now. So I teach statistics and developmental math, and I helped. I led the design team at Des Moines Area Community College on our Pathways course. Almost 3 years ago, we started working on it, and yeah, so I'm here to talk about our process. And I am a former high school math teacher, and so I'm in my 20th year now, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in my 17th year, and I also taught high school. We both do teach developmental and college level math, and specifically we both teach statistics and a lot of developmental, but I think both of us teaching statistics, that is one of the reasons why we're interested in something other than just an algebra preparation. We'll talk more about this in a little bit, but we definitely have common philosophy on that algebra is not the only way to get students ready for college level courses, especially non-STEM ones, and that whatever procedures we do, they should be deep as well as concepts. They should be done deeply. And Dan will be speaking more to that when he talks about their school's implementation. Okay, so first off, we told you a little bit about what we teach. I'd like to know, what do you teach, and are you full-time, part-time, administrator? Check everything that applies. So I think we have a poll coming up that allow you to click that.
I'm going to fill it out too, Kathy.
Me too. Okay, that's great. Okay, that's really helpful too. But a lot of us are in the same boat. And then we have a few administrators, which is good. All right, so a little bit more information we'd like about you. We want to know where you're at with Pathways courses. So are you piloting now? Are you thinking about piloting, or you're just here to learn? And we'll have a pop-up for that as well. actually, those of you that are piloting, would you say so in the chat box and list your college? I'm just curious who is teaching. And can you also list what Pathways course you're teaching? Like if it's QuantWay or StatWay or MLCS? Okay, and while you're doing that, we're going to go to one more. I looked it up the date, and it was actually April 2012. I gave an AMATYC webinar, and it was more of just a broad talk about, what are Pathways courses and some different ones that are going around the country, and just more of a broad overview. This today will be a lot more specific. Just kind of want to see if any of you have seen that, and that link to it is still on the AMATYC website. So if you want to see it, it is available. Okay. And for the question is, what is MLCS? We're going to talk about that in just a second. Actually, that's our next slide. Okay, so let's talk about what do we mean by when we say developmental pathways, so that we're not assuming something that knowledge that not everybody has. First off, we're talking about courses. MLCS is an abbreviation for Math Literacy for College Students. That's basically the Pathways course that's been developed through AMATYC's New Life program. QuantWay and StatWay are also some pathways, and those are through the Carnegie Foundation. And then University of Texas at Austin's Dana Center has the New Mathways project. So these are the biggest pathways that are being piloted, but then there's also just individual colleges that are doing their own version of and something, and it may not have a formal name. These courses are designed to create alternative routes to or through a college level math course, mainly non-STEM courses. So like Math Literacy for College Students and QuantWay are designed to get a student ready for either quantitative literacy, stats, both, it just depends. But we're trying to do something different other than just algebra. The emphasis and the philosophy is different. These are not traditional algebra classes that repeat high school algebra. The idea is they were built looking forward to the courses that the students are going to take, like statistics or gen ed math, and seeing what do the students need when they get there. When you use that perspective to design a course, it dramatically changes the content and the approaches used as compared to the traditional approach of looking back at high school, which means some topics we don't need as much of if we're looking to where they're going to go. Critical thinking and problem solving are the core principles of the course, and the way we do those is through authentic problems and contextualized learning. So all of these developmental pathways courses use big, meaty problems in realistic contexts. They're not the traditional story problems that we normally see in developmental algebra books. And it's based on letting students work with those and then pulling content and theory from them, as opposed to starting with the theory and then moving to some word problems. Okay, so we're going to do a super brief history, really quick. In 2009, that's when the Carnegie Foundation, Dana Center at the University of Texas, Austin, and AMATYC began developing all those various pathways. 2010 was spent with and 2009 with a lot of development. That's when lessons and courses were being developed and the pilots were starting, but they actually began being taught in 2011. So, and many pilots nationally began then. My college, Rock Valley College, that's when we began in 2011. That's when StatWay began. 2012 is when QuantWay began. And Des Moines Area Community College, they began piloting MLCS like what we do at RVC. They started in 2012. So we're actually, my school, we're starting we're halfway through our third year of piloting, and Dan's college is at halfway through their second year. 2013 was an exciting year because, and I apologize, my anal retentive self wants that to be shifted over, but it will be fixed in any slides that you get. The policies really began to change in various states last year regarding intermediate algebra, which has been something that's prohibited courses like this from being piloted. And in so doing, there was a lot more pilots that have started to develop, and the pathways this approach has actually started to scale, which is really exciting. Okay, so let's look at things really quickly at the national level, just to get a feel for what's going on and why is this going on. People want to do, a lot of schools want to do pathways because we have so many students that are associates and arts majors that are headed towards non-STEM courses, and most students are not headed towards calculus, which is what traditional developmental algebra was designed to prepare them for. So we have all these students, they're taking all this math that really isn't helpful to them when they get to a course like statistics or quantitative literacy. And developmental math is very expensive. Everybody's doing redesign. It's expensive, it's time consuming. People are looking for something different, not just in how you set up a classroom, but the content and the pedagogy. So, and wanting to increase preparedness for these college level courses in a different way. Where the pilots are? Everywhere. Every state is either piloting or working on pilots. So it's definitely not just a cluster here or there. It truly is something that nationally people are working on. What are the policies that are changing? Policies regarding intermediate algebra are changing through many states. A lot of states already have flexibility, but there's a lot of states that don't. I'm in Illinois. We've always been very rigid. Our policies changed in April of 2013. That was a faculty-led thing. There were several of us that tried to get policy changed. In some states like Florida and Washington State, it's been more at the state level. Changes have been made, and then faculty are told to implement them, or they're told you're allowed to implement them. It varies where you are in the country, but policies changing everywhere. If you're in one of those schools where you like this idea, but you need research to convince a colleague, or you're hearing about this idea and you're skeptical, and if you're wondering, does anybody have research? The answer is yes, and good research. So the Carnegie Foundation and University of Texas Austin's Dana Center, on their websites, and you can contact them directly, they do have research. They are doing studies. They've been doing studies since they started, and they will continue to do that. They're very committed to that. So it will give you ammo, if that's one thing you're looking for, or it will help ease your concerns, if that's another one. I've joked with Dan, I think it's kind of funny that I think research is important, but it's like people want to see the research before they will start teaching pathways, which is interesting to me because we have so much research that shows that our developmental algebra courses are problematic, but we're still teaching them. So yes, research is a good thing to have and we need it, but I think we already have so much of it and that doesn't always stop us. So it exists though if you want some encouragement that these can work. These classes absolutely do work. The biggest thing that is exciting is that 5 years ago, these courses were really out of the box and revolutionary, and they're now becoming the new normal. And I think that's just going to continue to happen. It reminds me of what I heard about happened in basically the mid-70s. You went from everybody taking college algebra to lots of people started taking this gen ed math class and stats, and now that's just normal for us. Not every student takes college algebra, and I think that transition is going to continue. So at this point, we're going to transition into getting more nuts and bolts. Dan's going to talk about his college's pilot and implementation, and then after that, then we're going to move more at the classroom level. And we're going to continue to get more specific on different ways to help make your implementation work.
All right. Thanks, Kathy. That was awesome. And the chats on the side were relevant to that as well, as far as, just that cultural change that's happening within community colleges all over the United States and the approaches we're taking. I'm assuming, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, the Des Moines Area Community College is very typical to a lot of community colleges around the nation where we have poor success rates. We had a problem. I'd been to several national conventions and heard speakers, but it wasn't honestly until Yuri Tresman spoke, and I think it was in Austin, and I got my department chair there to kind of convict us that what we had traditionally been doing was not working and that we need to do something different. And then from that point forward, we formed a curricular team. And let's see, Kathy, if I'm going to switch slides, I just got to arrow it over here, right?
Yes.
So our team started with creating competencies and designing backwards. The traditional curriculum was designed for STEM, and they said, okay, what should high school students know if they're in a STEM, traditional track? What should they know? Let's create courses that do that. So it was not a design with the end in mind. It was just what should they have known when they've gotten here. So we started with the end. What do they need for stats and math for liberal arts? What are the prerequisite skills? And let's design competencies around those. And that was a big challenge for our team to kind of think backwards. But it was a fun process. And so we created this new course called College Prep Math and went through the curriculum commission. There was a little resistance by a few vocal faculty members, um, and but I think overall we had a very high acceptance rate. And what ended up happening is our competencies were very similar to what we'd call our pre-algebra plus some additional ones. Um, and that ended up being kind of an interesting process. That's where that landed, as far as what are the prerequisite skills that we could articulate to get ready for those particular courses. And then we went through that curriculum commission process, and then we started to say, okay, what curriculum is out there? And we hadn't really even determined the best way to do this yet. And the pathways were still new enough that we weren't sure what was the best approach. So I dug around and finally found Kathy's curriculum. That curriculum was both a conceptual and procedural approach and had a lot of great attributes to it. But her course had a lot more in it. It had an introductory and intermediate algebra both, and we did not need that much. But we actually had Kathy help us, and we kind of went through her curriculum, and we made a custom edition to kind of address our specific needs at DMAC for our specific students that are going into stats and liberal arts. So we wanted both that conceptual and procedural. And what we determined was a lot of faculty didn't consider developmental math beyond procedures. And this was a big step for our department to think, well, we're going into conceptual courses. We should have a conceptual approach in the developmental course. So that was a big shift for us as well. And we were very much into using online homework and how does that fit in, and what does the classroom environment look like, and how do we use social constructivist learning theory. And so this was a big shift for our department. And so we had a curricular team that helped work on this over a few years to get where we're at. So then we got to fall 2012, December 2013, we piloted, and we met frequently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our process here as well as how we kind of scaled this. I see a question there about, did you have to purchase the curriculum? We just used Kathy's manuscript is how we piloted it initially, and started with that. And then this last fall is the first time we actually went, I'd say, what we scaled to more campuses, added more faculty, had a kind of a set way that we were going to do it. We had and I'm going to show you some of the documents that we've been working from. So our design team was made up of both adjunct and full-time. We are a large geographic community college, so we have like 6 or 7 campuses spread out over, like 75 miles. But we had representatives from I think all but one campus, and we had both full-time and adjunct on this design team. And we actually paid our adjuncts a little bit for the time they put in for those design team meetings, and we did it through a Google community and through Google Hangout. And I'm going to show some pictures of that. So this Google community was a place, since I didn't know a better way to get everybody to have shared documents, have online discussions, and honestly for us to do Google Hangouts so we could all meet essentially synchronously face to face and just talk about all these issues very frequently. And then, so here's what our Google community, here's a quick picture of it. We have discussions, we have our curriculum map, we have shared assessments, we have rubrics, and anything that's syllabi, they're all posted out here. And anybody who teaches this class at Des Moines Area Community College gets enrolled in the community, and they have access to all these things. And it's just a good launching point for a lot of great discussions about curriculum and assessment and everything else related to teaching and learning with students that are in this category, these developmental students. And a lot of our discussions would revolve around those things of student success. And that's another thing that we liked about the curriculum, is it had student success built into it. So it just hit on a lot of points that we wanted. It wasn't just, a one thing. It wasn't just curriculum. It wasn't just assessment. It wasn't just conceptual or just online or just procedures or just student success. We wanted to hit all of those things because we know this is a very complex problem. And there really is no silver bullet, but we wanted to, I guess, have the best bullet we could going forward at DMAC to address those students and their needs. So the Hangouts, I think, is our next slide. I'm going to show you a picture of that. And this is what a Google Hangout looks like. I don't know if anybody has been in one before, but it's a Brady Bunch screen in the bottom. We can actually share our documents, collaborate on them live, and this has been where our community has really been built. Like for instance, this afternoon at 2:30, we will be having another meeting. Anybody's teaching the course will be invited. Can ask questions. We're at the end of week 1. People can ask, what sections are going well, what should we cut out, how long does it actually take, anything related to student issues, or what do you do with the students that aren't attending, and how we do things like a daily 5 to help encourage them to have good behaviors. So, and then here's our curriculum map, and it kind of breaks it down week by week. Because we have different formats. We have 4 days a week, 2 days a week, and we have it as a 4-credit course. And the class is definitely designed much different than other ones at DMAC. Yeah, so this in the class, the face-to-face class is split up. There's small group discussion. We'll talk about that. There's discover, there's exploring, and there's always metacognition. Almost every section also has a paper, pencil homework and online homework associated with it, and the students get very used to them being in charge of the learning. And one of the things we really like about the curriculum was that there was a focus problem, so there's a large problem they work on over a long time as a group and write up a real solution to a real problem, which really pushes their reading comprehension, pushes their problem-solving abilities. All right, so I think Kathy and I will both kind of maybe collaborate. Kathy, is there anything I missed that you can think of running down what I do at DMAC?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I had to be mute for just a second. I think that sounded great. We wanted to shift into some of the obstacles because we both, we've been through this process, and we'll both speak to these just, informally as they come up. If you're in this boat, there's going to be obstacles, and like he said, we don't, have a silver bullet or anything, but we can definitely give you some tips. And one thing is, it can be done. You can make a new course, and you don't have to have every single person on board to make it happen. That would be lovely, but if you have a department, large or small, it's pretty hard to come up with something that everybody is going to be on board for all the time. It's tough to have. So here's one of the first obstacles that a lot of people have. A lot of faculty, like being in front of the room, and they're very comfortable with that, and that makes sense because that's how we teach a lot of our courses. So teaching a course that's like this, that's based heavily on group work, which I'll give you some tips on that in just a second. We'll look more at the classroom level. That's hard. Not everybody is comfortable with that right at the beginning, and they're not sure how to navigate through groups and what issues are going to come up with that. It's hard not being the sole authority and, I guess, distributor of knowledge on every single item. So there are things definitely that I'm in front of the board and I talk about, but there's also a lot of things that students do in group. I would say in my class it's about 50-50 in terms of how much group work compared to how much whole class work. Every teacher is different. Some teachers are like 90-10, 90 group, 90 in front of the board. It depends on the person and what their comfort level is, and it also a lot of times depends on the class. But one thing you have to get used to is not giving answers for every single thing. Letting students work with things, which means they are going to struggle sometimes, and not swooping in when you see that always, which it takes practice. And I'm not perfect at that, but I have to be real cognizant of that every time I'm teaching the course, not to always just give the answer, even though that's what they want. A lot of students don't love math classes, which we all know, but they know math classes. They know how it's supposed to work. So one of the obstacles is that students kind of have in their brain what it's supposed to look like. You're at the front of the room and they're taking notes. I mean, if you've redesigned, you've seen this, that students kind of like, well, this doesn't look like what I'm used to. So it's not even just this course, it's anything other than the traditional lecture model. They're sometimes going to be like, what is this? They also believe that most of them think that math is algebra. There's always one right answer. It's a quick calculation or a problem or something, and they think that it's just like skills, and you just go through it, and then I have to learn the next one. And it's a different approach. This approach is a larger scale. It's gaining problem solving and critical thinking abilities and looking at problems that take time. We do problems that might take 10 minutes, some might take a half hour, and some might take weeks. And trying to get students to understand that, that's how math can look. It isn't just, can you solve this equation for X? It's funny though, I think they adapt pretty quick. I just ended my first week of the semester and they've already like, okay, this is how we roll. But faculty sometimes take longer to adapt than that than students do. Buy-in. It takes time, and like I said a little bit ago, you're still gonna have people that don't necessarily love it. I mean, it's funny, we started our redesign of our traditional curriculum in 2007, and there's still people in my department that don't like it. They teach it, but that doesn't mean they necessarily love it. So that's okay. It's just hard because some faculty didn't learn this way or didn't necessarily have training in this. So it's new, and new can be scary. The biggest thing I've seen in my state, really, I've seen it a lot of places, but in Illinois, it's just pervasive. People are so worried that we are dumbing things down, that we are going to, if we're not going to, add rational expressions, and if we're not going to rationalize the denominator, that we're doing less, and that we're just making it easier. And that is absolutely not the case. And it becomes quickly apparent when you start working through the content. But at first glance, that's a natural reaction. It's to be expected. And the way to overcome that is to allow faculty to see a lesson, work through problems, and experience what the students are going to do. And it becomes very quickly obvious this is not simple. It looks different, but it's not easy. And the main thing, and I'm just a big believer in this, you need to have choice, and there's not going to be one thing that's going to make everybody happy, and that is absolutely okay. I mean, not everybody in my department teaches calculus either, and no one gets worried about that. I was thinking more about that, like, why does it bother people so much with this particular course or these types of courses that not everybody might buy in? And I think it's because at most of our colleges, probably everybody teaches developmental math at one point or another. Not every college is like that, but a lot of people, it's like if you're not teaching it now, you probably taught it at some point, or you're going to teach it in the future. Whereas when you get to the college level, people differentiate more based on their interests. And so we're saying, maybe that's part of the problem. We don't have enough differentiated curriculum at the developmental level, but the students are not all the same, and the majors aren't all the same. So we're trying to differentiate, which means you're going to have people that aren't necessarily going to like this approach. And that's okay, and they don't have to teach it. And I'm a big believer in not making people teach courses that they are philosophically opposed to. We only have 5 people in my department that teach math for elementary teachers because not everybody wants to, and I think this course is kind of like that. Okay, let's get some more tips we're going to go. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was going to comment a little bit with, especially as someone who really doesn't get a say in who teaches what at my institution. It's interesting. I tell the people who do have a say in that this course is not for every teacher. Just because they're certified to teach math, does that mean this class will be best suited for them to teach? They have to have a certain kind of math teaching philosophy that is open to this more social constructivist learning style, and it's not natural. It's not the way we were taught when we were going through. And that's had interesting, and I actually still have some full-time faculty who still do not understand this class. Like, how is it run? What is it actually about? Even though they get communicated, everything I communicate gets communicated with every dean and the contact person at every campus about it, but they're still like, so is that just Emporium course? I'm just like, oh no, it's not even close. But So whoever it is, regardless of who gets sent my direction is going to teach this course, I take some time one-on-one with them to explain the philosophy behind it, explain how the course is run. They get a copy of the curriculum, and they become part of the community. And so far, everyone's been, feels like, okay, yeah, this is a good thing. This is a good change to make for these students. So, but I just want to speak that it is not for everybody, like you were saying. I'd rather have people that want to teach this way.
Okay, so Jim has a really good question. I guess it depends on the acceleration in terms of what you're going to replace beginning or intermediate algebra. In my school, this course is really big. It's 6 credits, and it replaces both beginning and intermediate. In some schools, it just replaces beginning. Even if you just replace beginning, it's not going to dumb it down, but especially if you replace 2 courses, it really does not dumb it down. It's a hard course. Okay, so let's look at some classroom level tips. Groups are the thing I get asked about the most. The course is so heavy on group work. It's like, and that makes some people nervous, which is funny because I've used group work for my entire career, but I've never even used it this way. So it was new for me too, even though I'm comfortable with putting students with groups. But this is heavy group work, and even to the point where you might even assess with groups. And that's something that was very new for me. But one thing I want to mention before I give these tips, I don't believe that I am the authority on all things groups. I'm going to give you some ideas of things that I've tried that have worked and haven't worked, and I'm getting new ideas all the time, and colleagues give me ideas. And if you have something that works for you, please put it in the chat window and feel free to share it, because we all benefit from hearing from each other. One thing that I like to do is each unit, I put a group together and they stay together the entire unit. It's not each day sit wherever you want and pair up with somebody. When they work together for an extensive period of time, and in my case, they actually do projects together, they get to know each other, they have this sense of community, they don't feel alone. I mean, you always are going to have students in this course that this might be their first semester in college, and it's really nice to have a connection to other people. And if they're sick or something happens with a kid or something, they have to miss class, they know people that they can talk to and that they have a way to get in touch with them if they need to get notes or get help or whatever. So that to me is invaluable, especially with developmental students. But one thing, I've learned this through experience, is that I don't keep groups together when we switch units. I'll always have students that want to stay together and some that can't wait to get away from each other. I found if let's say I have a group of 4 and 2 people work really well together, and I keep them together but bring in 2 new people, the 2 people that worked together before tend to exclude the 2 new ones. So that's one reason that doesn't always work. If I keep an entire group intact, sometimes they get too familiar with each other and they get too chatty. But then I've also had groups that I've kept together the entire semester, and because they just weren't chatty by nature, they just worked really well together. So I think that's something you're just going to experiment with and see what works for you and your students. I don't think there's one right answer for that. This is something I'm trying new that's really exciting, and I like it. And I never, ever thought I would let students work together on a quiz or a test, because I was really concerned about will there be grade inflation. And I can say without question, you can do this and not have grade inflation. Really, the only thing that's inflated what I found the way I've been doing this is confidence. Students seem to be less anxious, and they seem to relax a little bit. Their grade doesn't always go up with it though, but that's okay. To me, if I have a less anxious student during a test, I still feel like that's a success. Some things I've done with this in terms of group quizzes is if I have like a real meaty problem, not like a skill-based problem, but something that's truly a problem that's hard, if you give that to a group and just give them 1 page and say you all have to work on this together and you're going to turn in 1 sheet, having other people to talk to eases the anxiety that comes sometimes with really tough problems that they haven't seen before. So that's a nice thing, and the problems are tough enough that, again, really their grades usually aren't that much different than they would have gotten on their own. But something else I tried last fall at the end of the semester, and I'm going to try it again. I loved it. What I did was my tests are 75 minutes, and this is not my idea, so I'm not going to claim ownership to it, but my colleague is brilliant. We have a 75-minute long test. I let my students work individually for 60 minutes. And then I said, for 10 minutes, you can get together with your group, and you can talk about anything you want on the test. You cannot hold a writing implement in your hand. So it's not going to be you just turn and copy off your neighbor. It's you guys can talk about anything in the test and get hints and tips or check with each other, whatever you want. And then for like the last 5 minutes, or 5 or 10, however you want to do it, I said, now you're going to go back, you're going to work by yourself, you can use your pencil again, you can fix, change, adjust, whatever you need to. That they really liked. I didn't feel like anybody was cheating, and I felt like people, it eased some of their anxiety if they were like completely stuck on a problem. This is something we just did this week in my class, since it was the first week. Students get worried when there's a lot of group work because they know they've been in groups before, and they know there's going to be people that are going to be overbearing sometimes and like run the group and not let other people have a say. And then there's also going to be the opposite end, which is the mooch, who doesn't show up and doesn't do anything but wants to put their name on the paper and get the points. So, I come right out and tell them during the first week, these things are inevitable. They happen every single semester. Let's talk about it now. What are we going to do when this happens? And one thing I've tried is asking students, what do you think is a fair consequence? And letting them establish what we're going to do instead of just me saying, okay, this is how we're going to do this. They have more ownership, and they come up with a lot of times really good ideas on ways to deal with things. They can be kind of harsh though to each other sometimes. I've had people like, well, I'm just going to kick somebody out of my group. So, I have had to mediate some, but usually they'll just say, okay, we're just going to leave that person's name off of our group paper that we turn in because they were never here. And mainly when I tell them if they're going to do that, make sure you let that person know so that they're not surprised. Dan, did you have any tips that you wanted to give for groups?
Sure. I like to vary my groups almost daily. The focus problem group, I get them together early. I do have them do a few of the activities early there's ones like assessing personalities and types of, and how that works with group dynamics. But then I will mix it up. So I leave them a little off balance so they're used to working with different people almost daily. Some days I'll just number them. Some days I'll say, you pick. But a lot of times I'll, who's wearing a certain color or who likes a certain team or, what's just something to keep it mixed up so they're always working with somebody new and they don't get sick of each other. That's for the daily
That sounds
stuff.
cool. I like that because it's like, that's neat. One thing Dan and I have both been saying is focus. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just say your idea of having, like I do that daily 5 with a little quiz at the beginning of the day. Your idea that you gave me to have them, maybe take the quiz individually and then compare it with someone, or actually take it as a group for that daily 5. Because I'm not real harsh on those scores, but I just want to kind of assess where they're at and help them be accountable to what they're supposed to be learning. That was a great idea to kind of have them do a group quiz at the beginning of the day sometimes, and those conversations between students are wonderful to listen to and very difficult to just stay out of.
Actually, that's funny that you mentioned that. I was going to say this at some point, so I guess this is as good a time as any. I had an interesting thing that happened yesterday, and that to me, if I can get someone who is kind of opposed to this type of course, maybe they haven't taught it or seen it or anything, but just on principle they're opposed to it. If they can see a class, sometimes I think it can show them what is possible, and it just is to piggyback on something that Dan just said. Yesterday, for the first part of the class period, we had to do some things with fractions, and we just had to practice on some of the skills. So they all set nice rows and took notes, and I worked problems at the board, and it was beautiful and quiet. And I mean, if someone walked by, they would have thought it was just a wonderful math class. I had no idea how much learning was going on, but it looked good. And then we actually went back and like, okay, we're all good on the skills. Make sure we can do this. Then I gave them a problem, a meaty problem, real life. They'd never seen it before. They didn't know what to do with it. And I said, get with your group, talk, and I gave them time. And it was just instant, the change in the classroom. It's like, bam, they all get together and it's heads together and they're arguing and talking. And what about this? But I don't agree with that. Well, why'd you do it that way? And to me, if I had to choose between the two environments, I would pick the second any day of the week. I mean, I understand there's sometimes I have to be up in front of the room because I have to, give them things that they have not learned before. But there's so much they can do. They have had a lot of math. They haven't perfected all of it, but they have knowledge. They can work together. We don't have to give them every single thing. And it is so rich when they get together and talk, and they learn so much hearing other people's perspective and debating, than just passively listening. And I'm not saying you can't learn from listening and lecture, because we all did, but there are other ways you can learn as well. So it is interesting to see that. One thing that is a challenge at the classroom level that sometimes faculty get worried about is this use of contextual problems. That's the core. We work in groups and we use a lot of contextual problems. So one thing I just say right off the bat, you're never going to find a context that's going to make everybody happy. Maybe if you had a group, like you knew everybody was in nursing and you used medical problems, then maybe that would be a case where everybody likes them. But this course for us is just any developmental student takes it at my school that placed in a beginning algebra, they can take it. So you're going to find things that people aren't going to like, and I just tell them, hey, just wait, we'll be on to something else. We don't spend like a month on, like, say, sports or the environment or something. We every single day, the contexts vary so that students don't shut down and be like, oh, I just hate this situation, I've never understood football or whatever. We don't stay in one too long so that we don't have that issue, and we just tell them, if you don't like it, just wait, it'll get better. This is something that faculty get nervous about. They're sometimes worried about working with a context that they're not as familiar with, because they're like, what if a student asks me a question that I can't answer? Like, we do a lesson in the materials that we have where it includes chemical equations, and I am not a chemist by a long shot. So the main thing that I'm a big believer in is we need to model for them good behaviors to be successful in college. And one is, if you don't know something, then you need to know how to find it out. And it's okay not to know everything. We just need to model for them what you should do. So it's not terrible to say, I don't know, but I've got a computer here, so I'm going to look it up. Or say, why don't you get your phone out and look it up? I mean, that's an actual good use of the phone instead of texting. This is just a motto that I have. It's answer questions with questions. Don't swoop in and rescue them when they're struggling. But on the flip side, be watchful if they are starting to get really super frustrated. If you see groups that they're just shutting down, it's really easy to tell. You're all teachers. You can tell when they're shutting down. Their body language sometimes, or just what they say. But when I see that, and if I see it like a whole class, usually I'll bring them together and say, you know what, it looks like we're stuck. Would you like a hint? I'll give them something, but I don't say, you know what, that really was too hard. I'm just going to tell you how to do it. It resists that urge, because that part where they're struggling, that's where they learn. And we want to rescue them, but it doesn't actually help them in the long run. They have to experience that unsettled part and get past it, because then that's when they'll actually learn something. Okay, so I think Dan and I will just jump back and forth with these. These are just like 10 big tips before you implement. And then when we get done with this, we'll do Q&A. So I'll let Dan start with the first one, because his school does this so well.
Yeah, that's what I learned the hard way. Was initially I'd put this team together of volunteers that wanted to create the curriculum, and I was only including communication to like the specific deans of those specific faculty. I was not including advisors or anybody else. And I learned the hard way. I need to include everybody that has a say. So I needed to include essentially all the deans and provosts, and I needed to include the advisors to let them know what's going down, and I needed to include some other, at least one faculty member at each campus that's, that kind of runs those things, those program chairs. So I don't think there's any such thing as too much communication with these things. And so after initially, so I still have this humongous email list that I send out, even the notifications of Hangouts, and when somebody has a new, uh, you know, test that they've created, it's still going out to even some of these administrators and stuff, so they are aware of the collaboration that's going on. And honestly, we're trying to model a situation here at DMAC that we'd like to see more courses, a constant improvement as a team of the curriculum. And we got to start with nothing, before us, so we hadn't any history to overcome. But now we're like, okay, can we do this with other courses? Can we redesign our other classes and have these kind of conversations with everybody involved district wide, and have a level playing field with adjuncts full time, and even our dual credit teachers at the high schools.
The next one, I think both of us have dealt with this, is it just can't be said enough. You've got to work with advisors. So, like how Dan was saying, you got to communicate with everyone. Advisors are key in that. It's necessary to have a good level of communication with them so that they're advising students well, and they have to be in the loop. We've definitely had some issues with that at our school, but I feel like we've gotten past them. The main thing I saw is that advisors have so much they're responsible for knowing, and so many programs, and their job is, there's a lot of information they have to remember. And what I found with ours is they didn't want to advise students to take this course at first because they were afraid of misadvising them. So, which is going to tie into the next thing I'm going to talk to you about, but just getting them over that hump, getting them comfortable with it, making sure they understand that, let's say worst case scenario, a student takes this in my class, MLCS, instead of beginning algebra, there's no loss. They can just take intermediate after it and go straight into, if they need to go into the STEM area. Even though my course has a lot of, because our course replaces beginning and intermediate algebra for the non-STEM student, we have a lot of intermediate algebra topics. We don't do all of the procedural manipulation, but we do model with rational, radical, exponential functions, quadratic functions. And so they see a lot of those ideas, and then they can move over to intermediate algebra and get the remaining procedures that they don't have. But that's a big one that you need to be thinking about. We never create courses in a vacuum. Well, we do. I did at my school. And then we realized, oops, that's not going to work. You need to think about, what happens if someone moves over to STEM? There aren't a ton of people majoring in English that all of a sudden decide to be engineers. The most common issue that I've seen is you'll get students who are nursing majors, and this is an outstanding course for nursing majors because it's all about, can you use all, are you quantitatively literate? And it's so good for them. But our nursing students need more math because of the science classes they're going into. So we made it so that they can move over into our intermediate algebra and keep going. Your school, you'll have to figure out what works. Here's a really simple solution. If you don't want to mess with any of your other courses, you can there's all different kinds of software packages out there by every publisher that exists. You can have like a little bridge program or some kind of online program that they can enroll in, and they can get the remaining skills that they might need to transfer like into your intermediate algebra course, say factoring, because we do some factoring, but we don't do all of it. We just put factoring as our first topic in intermediate. It makes all the intermediate students happy, and then our students also see it. But if you have faculty that say, well, we don't have factoring in our intermediate and we don't have time to add it, then you could make some kind of online independent type bridge thing through my math test or through ALEX or my foundations lab or whatever. There's all kinds of programs out there that you could do that with inexpensively and not have to necessarily mess with any of the courses that you have. Plan for data. You're going to need it. You're going to have people that want to know how things are going, be it at your school or an administrator or skeptical faculty or the state. You're going to have people that are going to want to know how things are going, and they want quantitative evidence of it. So talk to your institutional research before you start piloting. In our case, like our school, we have to get in the queue. That's what they always say, because they're so busy. That way we're part of their regular process of something they run data for. Dan, can you speak to number 5?
Sure. Actually, some of our adjuncts have been our best champions of this course, and since I think our liberal arts and math is 70% taught by adjuncts. There's definitely a need to get them, empowered to contribute to the course and ask questions when they need them. And like this semester, we had a problem. We lost a whole bunch of adjuncts because of the labor laws that were being enforced, and we got a whole bunch of new people that had never taught the course before. But again, scaling them, getting them in the community, getting them in the conversation right off the bat is something. I think it's critical for all courses, but for this course in particular, if you're just a traditional math teacher, you walk into this class and you get this textbook, you're going to be really thrown for a loop. So that's why we've been very conscientious about getting ahead of those situations. And I think the nursing, I've actually talked to our nursing program here at DMAC, and the students who are deficient in their mathematics for their placement exam, they are advising they take this course to get them ready for that placement exam. And now,
That's great.
and then we're actually having some other technical areas that are maybe looking at it too. And the other thing was, I can't remember. That's it. Oh, and
Oh,
I've
that just made
posted
me
my
think of
syllabus
something.
as a Google Doc, and I'm also putting the link to the competencies at DMAC for this course. They're in the chat.
I'm so glad you just said that, Dan, because I just realized that we should have had an 11th point on here, is that when you create this course, you need to talk to the other disciplines at your school that have like a beginning algebra prereq and see if this course would be allowed as an or equivalent. Because for a lot of areas, they won't mind. And actually, when they find out about it, a lot of them like it better than having students go through beginning algebra. Um, Plan for training. Here are the main things that I see that people want in terms of training. They get nervous, so they want their questions answered. That will be one thing that you'll want to include. They want to know, what does a typical day look like? They want to know, okay, what are some tips for working with groups? Can you let me see a test? Can you let me see a syllabus? What are your policies? What does your homework look like? And one of the best things, is if you can have a group and let them go through a lesson or look at curriculum together, have them work some problems, but they need to feel that. And if you have the pilot already going and you have people that are new and they could just come and sit in and watch a class, a lot of times that will ease concerns, but not everybody can make that happen. But those are things I've seen that people want with training. If you can get a plan for how you're going to do that in advance, that will help you as you go. Think about your classroom. Like if you have tables that don't move in a room, that's not a great setup. It's ideal if you can turn tables and students can physically get closer to each other. 24 to 30, I think, is about tops for class size, with like 25 being I think that is your top number, is about as good as anything. But some schools, you have to go above 25. If you're going to have 30 students or more, you're going to probably want maybe a student worker or somebody that works in like the tutoring center that can just be another set of eyes and ears to walk around and help you. But a smaller class is better for this, especially because you're going to be hopping around helping people. If you can observe another instructor's class or they can observe yours, especially when you're starting, you will learn so much. It is it's invaluable information that you don't see things in the back of the room that you see in the front of the room, and vice versa. So if you can make that happen, that's always great. And even if you can't, figure out a way that everybody can talk. Dan's college is amazing with this, with their Google group and what they do. So if you guys can't get together face-to-face to talk, if you can do something online, synchronous or not, but that gives people a sense of security. It calms a lot of anxiety, and it allows you to make this course your own. His course doesn't match my course, doesn't match the course that's down the road. Each college is unique. You got to make it work for you and your students. And so talking to your faculty is how you do that. If you want to ease the workload and help improve the course, share your assessments, share your tests, share your projects. It will allow you to refine them quicker because more people will be using them, and it does really reduce the workload. Really, the thing to remember is it's not going to be perfect out of the gate, and that's okay. You're going to have to tweak things, including content potentially, and that's just okay. It takes time, but it can definitely get there, and it's so worth it. These type of courses just really are worth it. Any work that takes to get them going. What questions? Let's see. Okay, one of them, I saw something about factoring, that there's people that are worried about that you're dumbing things down if you don't have factoring. There's two ways around that. Sometimes you're just never going to convince people, and the only way to convince them is that if you show them that yes, they can pass an intermediate algebra class, and ours do. Our students that transition over, they do. Sometimes they just have to see that it can happen, even though we don't do every factoring this way and that in our course. The other thing you can do is add factoring. If that's what it takes to make some people happy, then add a week on it, do some more of it, and that's not the end of the world. I mean, it's, you have to make it work for the people at your school. I said, it's Kathy. We do cover almost our entire text in the six credit hour course. And then Dan's school, they cut topics. A lot of people are using our book, do it as 4 credits, and they just cover the things they need. And it depends on the school because everybody wants a different emphasis. I'm working with a school now that wants to do the second half. I work with a lot of people that want to do the first half. Some people want to do the first unit and this and that throughout the rest of the book. So that's why we have a lot of content in it, because when we surveyed different states, nobody wanted to do the same 4 credit course. So that's why we put more in it. And we are both on semesters.
Yeah. And Kathy, like even now as a team, we're looking at, all right, there's a couple sections we'd really like to maybe add. And if we do that, where do we put them? And how do we balance that time and what do we emphasize? So it's not like it's, set in stone, but I'd say more like wet cement.
Yeah. Wet cement, I like that. Um, let's see. Where can I get more information on new pathways for developmental math? I'm going to put my blog, because I have a bunch of information on it. And yeah, Jim has Jack Rotman's blog or his website, which is great. It has about the New Life program. How much arithmetic do they really need? It's not really a ton. I just told my students this week, basically, I need you to be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide with whole numbers, fractions, and decimals, and I know they stink at fractions. So we do a ton of fractions all the time throughout the whole course, but I tell them, this can't be the first time you've seen fractions. Beyond that, we teach them how to plot points and how to add positives and negatives, and we teach them how to solve linear equations and much more. So they don't need a full pre-algebra course to do most of these pathways courses.
Kathy, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to just wrap it up here, and then if you wouldn't mind hanging around for a few additional questions, that would be great.
Okay.
So thanks again to everyone for participating in today's AMATYC webinar, and if you'd like to support future AMATYC webinars, please consider becoming a member of AMATYC at bit.ly/join-AMATYC. And please remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/AMATYC. And recording of past AMATYC webinars can be found at bit.ly/AMATYC-webinars, and it will take us about 1 to 2 weeks to produce and upload webinars to this archive, but I will email you all a link out of today's recording when it is done. And if you could please take 2 minutes to evaluate today's webinar content and the presenters at bit.ly/AMATYC17, that would be great. And if you need an email confirmation of your participation in the webinar today, please fill out your information at the end of that survey. So if you could thank Dan and Kathy again in the chat, that would be great. And they will stick around for a few more questions as well, so I'm going to mute my mic again and end the recording right now. So thanks again.
Thank you.